Hi, I'm Renee Williams,
And I'm Billy Thomas.
and welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. We've had a lot of insects that have affected, and it's not just us, it affects a lot of different people in a lot of different sectors.
Yeah, yes, no doubt. Glad to be with you today, Renee, and really excited about today's show. I think yeah, folks are going to get a lot out of today's show. We have Mr. Carl Harper with us. He's from the Kentucky office of the State Entomologist, and what's that? You'll learn all
Yeah,
about
exactly.
that. Carl's got a great presentation. It kind of sets that organization up within the history of the university, the kind of land grant mission, all that great stuff. But then he really digs into kind of what they do and how they address issues here in the state. And then we're going to have Mr. Chad Niman with us, talking a little bit about that intersection of sometimes we do have some, as you mentioned, Renee, some insects and some of our wood industry kind of interact a little bit. So Chad's going to be talking around that and about that intersection. But really glad to have both those gentlemen on today. It's going to be a great presentation for both. I'm looking forward to it. If you have questions for either one of them, please use the chat function, and we'll get to you there if you're on Zoom. And if you're a YouTube or podcast listener, thank you very much. And you can hit us up via email at forestry.extension@uky.edu, and we can respond with you that way. But Renee, delighted to be with you today on this beautiful day here in Lexington, Kentucky, with two great presenters coming up.
Definitely. So let's go ahead and get started. Carl, if you'd like to turn your camera on. Welcome to the show again. Now, see,
Greetings.
last time you were on, I promised you'd be back, and here you are.
Here you are.
I am back, and
I
I'm
know.
excited to be a part of this.
Hey, we're
Sure.
excited to have you, Carl. We've had a chance to kind of, you work with our department quite a bit and have over the years. So we certainly appreciate, all that you do for the things that we think and care about all the time, the trees and the natural resources we have here.
And I saw a
Well,
little bit of your presentation, and folks, you're in for a real treat because I didn't know all this history about UK, and it's
No,
like really cool. I
I
should
think
have like promoted, more UK history.
I know, and the photographs you've done a great job putting this
Hmm.
together, Carl. I know you probably spent a lot of time because it's awesome, man.
Yeah.
yeah.
It
Well,
is.
thank you very much. And yeah, it is one of those that you can go down a rabbit hole in some of this stuff, and it hopefully it will all tie together as to answering the question of who we are anyway.
Yes.
So
Okay,
when you're ready for me to go,
go
I'm
for
ready
it.
to
Let's
go.
do it. Really excited
All
to have
right.
you. Yeah, and I think people are in for a treat with your presentation.
Let's get started, and try to answer that question of who are we anyway, and get the clicker going. There we go. And so the best way that I thought to approach this, as was kind of pointed out, is giving you a little bit of history about the University of Kentucky. And in the time I have allotted, I'm just going to be jumping into parts, give a high level, kind of a quick point about a certain point in time on this in the history side of things, but I'm going to go way back to 1783, and that's when Transylvania University was actually established. And then later on in 1858, another university by the name of Kentucky University was established in Harrodsburg. It was formerly named Bacon College, and there was a whole lot of rabbit hole work history there that you might find interesting. But 4 years later, in 1862, there was some funding from the U.S. government through the Morrill Land Grant Act, and that was appropriated. And the idea was for this was to have, quote, at least one college in each state where the leading object shall be, without excluding other scientific and classical studies, and including military tactics, to teach such branches of learning as are related to agriculture and the mechanic arts. And so these two universities merged together in 1865 to form Kentucky University. And there were really three initial colleges in operation at the time: College of Arts, College of Law, and one that you may not think about, but the College of the Bible was one of the colleges within Kentucky University. And then a year later in 1866, the Agriculture or A&M College was added. Kentucky University was dedicated to the studies of agriculture, mechanical arts, and military tactics. And it was actually located at the time on the grounds of Ashland, the Henry Clay Estate, and the Woodlands Estate, just east of what we know of today's Woodland Park. And the spoiler alert I might add is that this information does lead ultimately to the creation of our office. By we are tied to the university in that way, and I popped in, like classes at the time, $595 for dollars for a semester in 1865 in today's dollars. Um, what's in a name, as you can see in kind of the slide. Apparently, there are some disagreements on how best to run Kentucky University. There was a little soap opera, it seems, that was happening here, and in 1878, the legislature, Kentucky legislature, had to step in and sever the A&M College from Kentucky University. They renamed A&M College to State College of Kentucky. Also, the College of the Bible separates out, and in later years, they changed their name to what you may know them as today as the Lexington Theological Seminary. But for the new school, the A&M College, Lexington had donated a 52-acre park and fairgrounds. And before we get to that, I wanted to show you that this is the main building. So in the upper right, you can see the one of the original main building, and then what it looks like a little bit later. But here's a map of where State College was located and then where it was moved to in today's present UK campus. And in 1908, another name change occurred, and it changed from State College to State University of Kentucky. And then finally in 1916, State University of Kentucky officially becomes University of Kentucky. But because of this name change, Kentucky University, that was still around, decides to change their name back to Transylvania University. And the idea was to avoid some confusion that might ensue with similarity in names. And as for the map, to give you a little more context, I took and zoomed in a little bit on the old map, took a Google street map, and then made it a little bit transparent. But you can see the lake. This is where the student center is located. Here's where the main building is at. This is Patterson Office Tower. Just to kind of give you an idea, Buell Armory is right there. And then to go one step further, I pulled in a little bird's eye view satellite map from Bing, and to give you a better view of the Student Center, Patterson Office Tower, main building, and this is the Gillis building, which was, I'll mention later, is one of the Ag Experiment Station buildings at the time. Well, UK campus has grown just a little bit. Here you have the gray and red shaded areas. It was 52 acres, as you can see in the little green circle. Now we're well over 918 acres. This doesn't even include the research farms or other property that the university owns or manages. In fact, one of the other things about UK is it's one of 8 universities in the country with a research, teaching campus, as well as a medical center all in one location. But when you tie all this property together, all in total, on campus and off campus, we have well over 30,000 acres of property, if I looked it up correctly. But since it's the only original surviving structure, I showed a picture of it earlier. There were 3 original structures, and main building is the only standing one. And I wanted to deviate on that just a little bit and talk about it. The main building, it actually housed the college armory. It contained classrooms and offices. It had a natural history museum at one point, a chapel for students, and in the basement area had a post office, a bookstore, and a cafeteria. The cupola that you can see at one point contained a clock and a captain's walk, and it was used by the local weather observatory. But in 1897, you can see that it was removed in this panoramic picture. By the spring of 1948, the building housed only the administrative departments and was renamed the Administration Building and remained called that until 2004. So this is what the building looked like when I came here as a student in 92. It was called the Administration Building, and they were doing some renovations on it. And in 2001, May 15th, a fire was set due to construction work. There was some copper work gone awry. A propane torch was spending a little too much time with the wooden structure. And so there was that fire. They actually had to do full renovations of the inside. And in fact, the inside, they added a 4th floor. They put a nod to the cupola. Again, it reopened October 25th, 2004. So in 3 days from now, to be its 21st anniversary of reopening. And it was named its original name again. It went from the administration building to the main building. And it has, again, the administrative offices, the presidents, some classrooms, some conference rooms, different things like that. And so that being the only structure on campus, I wanted to sidetrack with that because I thought that was an interesting piece, well, to me. But back to who we are anyway. And I want to talk about, the Hatch Act. There was a need, a recognized need for investigation, and Congress, through the Hatch Act, had set aside some funds for the purpose of establishing experiment stations. UK, by setting up that A&M college, was already positioned to take advantage of these funds. And it was very important because this act gave impetus to the emergence of economic entomology as a scientific profession. And in fact, it was this act is why entomologists were some of the first to be hired. They were hired to solve the state's insect problem. So, being in the entomology department and working with a lot of entomologists, I think it's pretty cool that they were some of the first to be hired. And it's interesting, they were told, and when I was looking this up, to put out reports, and the reports were to help farmers and their wives. But there were bulletins that were supposed to be sent out from the experiment station on a regular basis with the research that was done to help the general public in how they dealt with the work that they did on farms. Well, by 1889, Harrison Garman was named the chair of entomology and biology. Garman had been an assistant entomologist under a man named S.A. Forbes, Stephen Forbes, and I'll tie that here in just a minute. But Garman in 1889 began his official services in Kentucky that lasted for 40 years. And so while Garman was still studying at Johns Hopkins University, an awareness did grow of a threat from an introduced insect pest. California had become alarmed by this threat, and they enacted some laws in 1881 to try to prevent the introduction of plant pests. Well, over time, several other states followed suit with legislation, and they were commonly referred to as nursery laws because that was where the pests were known to move through, was through the nursery stock. And it was primarily because of the seriousness of the San Jose scale, which was spreading rapidly throughout the country. Well, as you can imagine, states differ greatly in their legislation and methods for how to deal with the problem. Well, come 1897, and I couldn't tell if it was April or July, but a meeting with the state entomologists were called by S.A. Forbes, and it was to discuss this new pest and how can they find a way to be, alleviate it. Garman would have been chairing his job as the entomology and botany department for at least 8 years now. And this group at this meeting felt that both state and federal legislation was imperative, and they endorsed a call for a national convention. Well, the outcome from that was the then Kentucky statute. So it was Kentucky Statute 1925, titled Fruit Trees and Diseased. It was enacted, and by law, the chair of entomology, Garman at the time, was now also the Kentucky State Entomologist. And so you may ask the question, why put this role at the university? Well, at the time, that is where the knowledge base was located. So it just made sense. That's where all the research was being done, the investigation was being done, and so the knowledge base was there. And so that's how they worked toward that. And there was a land grant college, and the idea was to have one in each state. So that's where it all went from. And the idea of this nursery inspection law, as you can see, that was put forth by Garman, was to help prevent the spread of unwanted pests. And in this case, it was focusing on San Jose scale, but it was all unwanted pests. Well, that was the state side. On the federal side, the Federal Insect Pest Act in 1905 was put in place, and it was all done visually. This is the way this worked. And well, that wasn't enough. Things were still getting in. And so then the Plant Quarantine Act in 1912 was enacted, and it was there to regulate the movement of known carriers of insect pests and diseases. And over the years, more eradication and other programs were added. Well, come 1926, in Kentucky, the statutes were being revised. And so therefore, we have what we now know as the Kentucky Revised Statutes, or KRS. And it, it it's one of those that in many states, the state entomologists started shifting to state departments of ag because we are a regulatory entity, but in Kentucky, it stayed here at the University of Kentucky, and in South Carolina, it's still at Clemson. But either way you look at it, in the Kentucky statutes and the Kentucky revised statutes, they still left the state entomologist office, and I am going to say that I'm extremely grateful that it is, under the University of Kentucky Department of Entomology. And it's led by our chair. And the chair, as you can see, I always find interesting here under KRS 249, the state entomologist shall serve without pay other than his salary. So our boss, Dr. Polly, is the department chair, and he is also the state entomologist. So he gets two jobs for the price of one. And when he came on as the state entomologist, I had mentioned to him that our job is to make him look good, meaning that, we're going to carry out our job responsibilities to a level that minimizes the amount of time required to administer that role. He has a lot of stuff to do, and he does a lot for our office and our department. And if we can make his role as the state entomologist easier, then that's what we're going to do. And one final note, kind of historically related, is from the beginning, people may not know this, but the law gives the office the right to go wherever is necessary to address infected or infested plant or plant parts, anything. So we have the right to go on private property. Not that we're just going to go traipsing onto people's property without permission, but we do legally have the right to go onto private property when we need to do so to address these potential problems. But we're going to fast forward now. We're going to fast forward to today, and as you can probably tell, we do a lot more than San Jose scale. That's not what we're doing only. We're not just looking for that. As a state regulatory agency, we work with other state and federal counterparts across the U.S. We're partners with those people to help safeguard our nation's forests and crops against entry, establishment, and spread of economically and environmentally significant pests. And we do it in a variety of ways. All the information that I'm getting ready to present, and even some of the history I have with our website there, the ose.uky.edu. So if you want to learn more, you definitely can check us out on our website. But for our office, we do it through a variety of different ways. We do it through licensing. So we talked about that. You have to be licensed to sell plants in the state of Kentucky. We do it through certifications. So if you're getting ready to send stuff, plant or plant products, there's a method that you have to follow to do that. We do surveys, and we deal with a lot of looking for a lot of different insect pests that may be a problem in our state or in the United States for that matter. And then we do it through outreach. And our goal here in all of these things is our office is here to protect Kentucky's forests. And with trade, we're constantly bombarded with concerns that may affect us and where we live. And so let's jump into the licensing side of things. With our licensing, as you saw from kind of the little history side of things, the movement of pests are of great concern, and they still are today, and maybe even more so because of international trade. We know that the majority of the serious insect pests that occur in the United States are of foreign origin. About 90% of these are introduced through things like shipments of plants and seeds and plant products. So licensing is the way that we monitor who is doing what. We hope it encourages fair and honest trade with a quality, clean product. And as you can see from the slide here, we do try to answer the questions that we get a lot. And this falls more into my coworker Joe and Jenny's world and Sarah now. But why do I have to be licensed? Well, we try to answer that. But I'm not a nursery, because there's always somebody saying that. We try to answer that. I'm thinking about getting into the business, but I don't know what to do. How do I do it? There are those that are wanting to ship out of state. How do we do that? And some are asking, is this place licensed? And so, in fact, if you're a customer purchasing plant products from a person or a company, then you have the right to actually ask to see if they're licensed and compliant with KRS 249. And so we started with plant sales licensing in 1897, and we're still doing that today. Well, along with the licensing side of things, we do certifications. And in the certification world, it's all about things because of, like the creation of the acts like the Federal Insect Pest Act and the Plant Quarantine Act is because the movement of pests of concern are problematic. And we're state regulatory agency. We are state counterparts with USDA, APHIS, PPQ, and USDA is United States Department of Agriculture, Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, so APHIS, and PPQ is Plant Protection and Quarantine. So PPQ is our federal counterpart. But for things that we do is we give guidance to those that may be importing plant or plant products into the US or our state. We don't control imports, but people ask us how they do that, and so we try to give guidance for them on where to go and how to do it. In a lot of cases, there may be a permit required when you bring stuff into the United States or into our state, and we review those permits to be sure that they are up to what we want them to be before they come here. One thing that you may not know is we actually do houseplant inspections. So when you move and you want to take your houseplants with you, there are some states, California, Florida, Texas, and others, that they want your houseplants inspected and certified before being allowed to even enter into that state. And our office does that. But one of the biggest things that we do is export certification, and it's called phytosanitary certification. So PHYTO for phyto is plant, sanitary is clean, so it's a clean plant certificate. And as such, we're able to certify shipments of plants, plant products heading from Kentucky to literally the rest of the world. And as the state regulatory agencies, we are the ones that do those certifications for plant and plant products. They even move from state to state and U.S. territories. And in this picture here, you can see, and I just did this yesterday, there's a company in Kentucky that builds train models. So this is a model of the real deal here in the back. I don't know where it is. You all may be familiar with it, but that's made all out of plant material, from wood to bark, moss, all of that. And so there's an industry for this, and they have to be under compliance before they can send that stuff out of the state. These are actually going to California, is where they were headed to. And so our job is to make sure that the product being shipped meets the specifications set forth by either the country or the state that the product is headed to. So we don't make the rules, we just enforce them. So we have Jenny here looking at poinsettias. I believe they were headed to South America or Central America. And here is some lumber, ash lumber headed to the European Union at the time being inspected. It had to be bark free, like square edge, no bark showing whatsoever. We do surveys, and with surveys, that's a natural fit for us. It's for monitoring for invasives and pests of concern. And I just created some links here that show a landing page for the general public to be a part of all this stuff, and they can learn more about it. The biggest part of what we do in our office and as technologies develop is we're trying to adapt and utilize those technologies. And I've been able to build some survey tools using Esri and the GIS apps that they allow us to customize, so that, like where Janet here is hanging a trap, she can actually mark it with the app so that we know where it is spatially. So we have a GIS reference of where that trap is and what it's trapping for. One of the biggest surveys that we do is for spongy moth. And here you see Joe and Janet screening some traps. That's always a big part of what we do in the fall. But due to the funding, we placed just under 4,000 traps across the state. And as you can see, we don't cover the state. We don't even come close. The state could actually handle probably nearly 12,000 traps on a 3-kilometer grid. And that's what these traps are placed on, is a 3K grid. But while spongy moth is one of our bigger surveys, we participate in a number of other surveys where we place traps or do visual surveys across the state. And here's a map of sites that we put these traps or do these visual surveys at. And so for the trapping, we do a lot of forest pest surveys, such as the Asian defoliator survey, but we also have an orchard and a grape and corn, box tree moss, soybean surveys. We do visual surveys for things like fire ant, for spotted lanternfly. We know that that's becoming more and more prevalent in our state. But for a number of these surveys, this is something that would be neat if citizen scientists could get involved in, but logistically, could be challenging because really the types of traps and how they must be handled is always something we have to pay attention to. And finally, a piece that we rely on heavily is outreach. Because remember, our goal here in our office is to protect Kentucky's forests, and with trade, we're constantly being bombarded with those concerns that may affect us and where we live. And we know that we can't do it by ourselves. We need help. And this is something that I did a deep dive in on from the woods today on April 16th. But a refresher is in 2025, it was our 4th year of our citizen science program. We utilized the cooperative extension offices in all 120 counties. And the idea then is to allow the extension offices and those citizens within those counties to have direct participation in the activities that our office is involved in. And their work does factor into the decisions on what we do and how we move forward. And it's big enough that I, wanted to create a website. This is where we actually house all of our survey work. So our internal work that we do in our office, but also the citizen science work. I have a website that you can get to from our homepage. But for citizen science, you can do applications, you can monitor what you've done in the field and all that good stuff. And here's an overlay of the larger icons are citizen science traps. The smaller icons are the national program. I sent out 1,000 traps for spongy moth. 400 got marked, so not everybody marks them. But the one thing to show you is the darker spots are where positive traps are this year. So we've found 262 moths this year in our regular trapping. And our citizen science trappers, we had 4 captured. They're not represented on here yet. I've got them submitted, but they haven't made it through the system just yet. But they were all single captures, and we had a total of 4, 3 in Morgan County and 1 in Rowan County. So that puts us up to 266 moths caught this year. And I'm just about done here. Our office does a lot, I think, with just 6 staff, and we cover the entire state. And hopefully you have a better feel for what we do. I know it's a 30,000-foot view of what our office does, but it can't get done. We have Joe and Janet and Jenny and Sarah and JD all playing their part, and Dr. Polly in the top center there is our state entomologist. But we do cover a lot of things, and I'm going to close by saying this. Kind of a one final note, we operate on fees and services, and for our survey work with USDA, federal grants are earmarked for such work, and Janet is the one that does the yeoman's work on getting those executed for us to even be able to do those surveys. We don't receive any state tax dollars currently to operate our office. We're an unfunded KRS 249 mandate. And another tidbit of information is that we operate directly off the statute. We don't even have administrative regs to operate by. And so we're operating off of the bigger regulations. But I think we do a lot of work and we accomplish a lot. And so with that, hopefully I kept everything in time. And there's my contact information should anybody want to get in touch with me.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you so very much. Yeah, no, I really loved how you pulled this all together, given because it's kind of, what's that old saying? Something you have to know where you've been to know where you're going or something like that. So it's like it's really neat because I work here and I had no clue about all that history. So that's really, really something nice that I liked seeing.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. And
I was going to say, Carl, I think it's impressive how much you all can do with so few folks. I know
Right.
obviously you have to partner with a lot of people and stuff, but it is pretty impressive.
I thought you had a lot more people working with all the stuff that you all do.
Few of us do a whole lot, and we can't do it without each other. That's for sure. It's team effort.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Oh, that's so cool. So cool. Great stuff, man. Really appreciate you, Carl, and all you do. And I look forward to having you back in the future on some other topics. Use this as an outlet to help get the word out.
Sure.
We'd love to have you again for sure.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the next one.
I know. Yeah. We got
you just let me know when.
Chad Niman's coming up next. We always love Chad. All right. Greetings, Chad. How are you, buddy?
Chad, how are you?
Hi, Billy and Renee.
Happy Forest Products Week.
Happy Forest Products Week to everyone.
Yeah, no doubt. You've been busy boy this week. I know. We started out, I know, on Monday, you all were feeding everybody on campus, it looked like.
Pretty
Great way
much.
to kick off the week. That's right.
Yeah, no, it was cool. Very cool.
I
And
think we
what
ended
better
up,
way to talk about Forest Products Week than to
yeah.
talk about all the folks who work to keep our forests healthy and productive. And
Mhm.
what a great presentation by Carl there.
Yeah.
I'm glad to build upon that. I just want to talk a little bit about how these invasive insects affect our wood industries out there. They affect all of us, as you all know.
Yeah, no doubt.
Mhm.
And so just an opportunity to share a little bit about that. Pull up my presentation here.
Ready?
Am I in the right presentation?
It's thinking. There we go. Got it. Yep, looks good.
Yep, got you.
So we're celebrating 65 years of Forest Products Week in this country. And so we've had a lot of different invasive insects and forest health threats over those many years. But fortunately, there are folks working on the front lines to keep these invasive insects out, because every dollar spent in prevention leads to a lot fewer dollars being lost further on down the process. And so, such a great opportunity to talk about where our different wood products come from and the different types of forests that produce different types of wood. So our forests here in Kentucky, we've got a lot of hardwood forests, and thinking about how these forests operate, the different dynamic systems, the disturbance that drives the succession in these systems, and the need to be able to manage our forests and woodlands for this succession, keeping diversity of trees and forest health at the forefront. And with that, understanding these different threats to forest health, trees, and ecosystem function. And to help highlight these importance of our forests and the different aspects like forest health, we have created the first Forestry and Natural Resources high school curriculum approved by the Kentucky Department of Education, and it's Forestry Works of Kentucky. And we think this is an important component to help spread awareness of the importance of forests, but also the importance of forest health and these invasive threats. So getting to work with our entomologists that work to keep our forests healthy, I've got to see how we can spread the word to industry and different groups and help them know that these different threats are coming, and also what they have to do sometimes to be able to adjust to those different threats that have gotten here. And so if we look at Kentucky's forest sector, we have these trees that are covering nearly half of Kentucky's land surface. So roughly 49% of our state is in trees. And so such an important resource, and it really adds to our agriculture and manufacturing in the state. And such a great resource, and so much of it being privately owned. And so if we look at what the cost of these different biological invasions are to the US as a whole, we know that from 1960 to currently, that it adds up to trillions of dollars of loss to our forest and agricultural resources. And so such a significant problem that we want to address and always be working on to keep our forests and agricultural systems productive. And why that's so important in Kentucky, with forests covering nearly half the state, we have a lot of industry that altogether contributes about $19 billion each year to Kentucky's economy. And we have this really important bourbon industry here that contributes $9 billion each year. And that most important ingredient in that bourbon is the white oak. And you might have seen where Carl was talking about the spongy moth and how it's right on our doorstep. And that species of moth really can do some detriment to oaks, and white oak being one of those. And so by having these monitoring programs, we're able to see what is going on with these invasive pests and be able to address them, because we have nearly 60,000 Kentuckians employed in this forest sector, and it's so important to our state's future prosperity and all of our overall health. And so to dial in on one of these problems we've had in the past and is still ongoing is the ash disaster. So back in 2017, our team worked on putting together an analysis to see the loss of timber volume and what that dollar value was from loss of ash to the state of Kentucky. And so the emerald ash borer, you've probably heard a little bit about, came into the state in 2009, and it spread rapidly across the state. And so the analysis we conducted, it was back in 2017, and nearly $100 million annually was what we calculated the loss for farmers, landowners, and the state as a whole. We've got a link down here, but you can find that ash disaster paper on our website if you'd like to learn more. But I'm going to go through a few slides that talk about that study. And so just showing the cumulative loss, how we quantified that nearly $100 million a year loss. You look at the landowner where all of this starts, right? The people who own the forests, they lose timber revenue and they have these dead ash trees on their property. And as that goes into the logging phase, there's a loss there for those who are harvesting the trees. So you think about our sawmills and wood industries across the state and how they lose from having one of our significant tree species. What used to be about 5% of our forest composition is now dying and missing from the landscape. And so you can see all the way throughout into our finished goods, our secondary manufacturing being the hardest hit of these different subsectors within the forest industry. And so we have a picture here showing some ash flooring. Ash was a very commonly used species for flooring due to its straight grain, its ability to take a finish really well, and it was relatively abundant and affordable. It's at a price point that was lower than oak and very affordable for a lot of families to be able to put ash flooring into their houses. It has a great appearance, as you can see. And so cabinet and flooring manufacturers in Kentucky and throughout this region were heavily impacted as this species was decreasing in our forest harvesting. And so we think about that impact, that loss of the resource, and we think about our woodland owners and farmers who own the land. And depending upon how much percentage-wise ash made up of those woodlands, you can see that it could be a very significant loss for timber value. But then we also think about that value in the harvest as well, as we have these logging operators, these professionals out there harvesting timber, and their job became much harder and more challenging as they would get into forest stands that are ready for harvest and have these standing dead ash trees that are very dangerous. And so that added a lot of danger to harvesting and still continues to make some stands very challenging to harvest, in addition to that loss of timber volume and value. And so if we look at, following that economic loss, our 2015 data showed that nearly 3.3 billion board feet were standing of ash at that time, which represented about 4.3% of all saw timber in Kentucky. And if we go back to 2009, when the emerald ash borer came into the state, that was nearly 5% of our forest composition. Now, if we look at our forest inventory analysis data that's available up to 2021, it shows that ash is now less than 2.4% of timber volume in Kentucky. So we can see this disaster is still occurring, and it's further out in western Kentucky and that area of the state where ash is being impacted that was previously living as the emerald ash forest continued to spread. And so this little map here just shows the density of ash in some of our counties being extremely high. And so some counties and areas of the state being impacted more than others, even though we have ash trees in every county of the state. And so a significant loss for everyone, but some counties being even more negatively impacted than others. And so if we look at the number of dead trees, back when we conducted this analysis, we were really wanting to highlight the change from 2009 into 2015. So going from nearly 4 million dead ash trees in 2009 to 10.5 million in 2015. So a significant change in just a few years' time. But looking at that 2021 data, over 30 million dead ash trees now, and even more so, as we've progressed further from 2021. And so a huge loss of volume and board footage that ended up being carbon released back to the atmosphere, but also a loss of real wood volume. And so a horrible tragedy in itself. So Dr. Crocker and myself put together a 2018 white paper on ambrosia beetle, which came in after emerald ash borer. And so what this did was it reduced the amount of time that loggers had to be able to get dead ash trees out of the woods. And so this really exacerbated the loss of value and volume as these trees, this black spotting that you see, this ambrosia stain, while it might look nice in appearance and could be marketed well to highlight that feature, the decomposition of the wood was sped up from this fungus and the secondary ambrosia beetles. And so that further sped up the process of losing that value and volume. And so this is important as we have a state that making bats is a really big contributor to our economy. We have a big 100-foot bat downtown Louisville and a couple of different companies in the state that previously were using ash for most of their bat production. And so they had to pivot. And so they've adjusted to using species like maple and hickory and alder and a few others. But it's been an adjustment that's been made really quickly to respond to the loss of ash resource. And so if we look across our state, we have a lot of loggers and we have a lot of wood industries. Each of these dots is one of those wood industries. And so you can imagine all of these different facilities being impacted by the loss of ash and other invasive insect threats as they occur. And as we do have new threats that come online, there are quarantines and restrictions, as Craig mentioned. And so those are new requirements that industry has to follow and abide by. And so that's why preventative actions that keep these invasive pests out really save us so much money in the long run. And it's so important that we continue to support those programs and keep an eye on what threats are out there to agriculture and forestry. As we get into export, there are FIDO certifications, which Craig mentioned, and that office is able to support any questions that folks have as they're looking to export and find those types of markets and what they need to do to meet those markets. As we look into some markets, there is a requirement for methyl bromide being used to phytosanitize. And so we know that methyl bromide is a pretty tough chemical. It's actually not legal to produce it here in the US. And so any use of that is highly regulated and it's a somewhat of a barrier to purchasing that material and treating with it. And the environmental impacts to our atmosphere from using that chemical are not good. So if we can avoid using methyl bromide, that's always a good thing. And so solutions that we have to try to address this is being able to dry more wood in a kiln. So as we think about finished goods manufacturing and how that can play a role in reducing spread of invasive insects, the further advanced our manufacturing and other nations' manufacturing is, the fewer invasive pests that are spread. As drying the wood, when we do that properly, it kills insects and eggs. And by reducing the moisture content in the wood, it becomes a less hospitable environment for the fungus and insects that might want to live and reproduce in that material. And so all of this can add local and regional manufacturing, but also reduce the spread of these invasive insects globally. And so with that, there's a need for new uses for wood and lumber. And so thinking about these potential uses for lumber, local and regionally, how we can use more wood. And so some options that come to mind are cross-laminated timber, what we call CLTs, but also a lot of decking material, thermally modified products. There's a lot of new technology that's coming online, and that allows us to be able to manufacture new products and use new processes. And there's always value in understanding our materials and where they come from. And so, very important role. And so, as we celebrate 65 years of National Forest Products Week this week, we want to encourage you to celebrate forest products and forests every day. I do want to give a shout out to the Kentucky Invasive Plant Council, as they're having an invasive plant conference coming up soon here in November. And so one of the connections with these invasive plants is that they are often hosts for these invasive insects. And so tree of heaven and spotted lanternfly are one of those examples, but so many others. And so a great opportunity to learn more about those plant and invasive insect relationships. And so that's all I have for today. And I have time for any questions if anyone has any.
Thanks, Chad. That was wonderful. Really do appreciate that. That was awesome. We did have a question, and it said, are we finding any percentage of ash that's resistant to EAB?
So Dr. Crocker would probably be the best person to talk to about that. But I have heard of lingering ash and the fact that there are some that are out there. And so I'll leave that kind of open on my answer.
So we'll keep the fingers crossed for now. Okay.
Yeah. We'll see if we can't get Dr. Crocker on here to talk about lingering ash. I know she's talked about it a couple of times. But I'm not sure that they have all the parameters around why it is lingering yet, but I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. We'll dig into that.
Get back to you.
Yeah. No, Chad, really appreciate your presentation. Really all you do for the wood industry here in Kentucky. I mean, I know you live and breathe it every day, but I really do appreciate what you do to try to help everybody out here in the state in so many different ways. So thank you, buddy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We have great forest resources that help all of us to have better lives, and they add a lot of value to our state.
They really do. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, good stuff. Right. Yes, excellent. Two wonderful presenters talking about really important stuff, man.
Exactly. It was really, really good. And, I told you we were going to be talking about insects in different ways.
Yeah, we kind of
we did that, got a history about UK, which was really cool, right?
Love that.
Yeah, and then learned a lot about the forest products and forest wood in the wood industry, and how the insects are affecting them, because it's something that you're kind of like, didn't really think about that.
I know. Yeah, that relationship that we have with the State Office of Entomologists is really important. So appreciate them for what they do, and certainly that as well.
But you know what? We also appreciate you, because if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be doing this, right?
I know. It'd be just Renee and I talking to each other. And,
we can do that
might be fun. That's not going to help everybody else. So, thank you all for being with us. Yeah.
We do. And so if you want to watch any of our shows that we've done in the past, you can go to FromTheWoodsToday.com, and they are all there. We have over 250 of them.
I bet you can watch and watch and watch. And I'll tell you what, if you don't see what you're looking for, let us know. We really do try to find content that covers important topics for our forests and wildlife and natural resources. If you can't find what you're looking for, let us know. Maybe somebody else is looking for it too.
That's true, because if you want to know about it, I'm sure someone else does too.
No doubt. So, but thank y'all for being out there.
Appreciate y'all joining us, and we will see y'all next week. Take care.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
From the woods today. From the woods today.